Welcome! I have recently talked about Greece in World War I, promising that I would also explain what happened in the country between the two wars. In this video, I will indeed take a look at the interwar period, which was somewhat chaotic. Not long after the Great War, Greece was given Western Thrace in the Treaty of Neuilly, which was signed in November 1919. Even before that, already in May, Greek forces had landed at Smyrna, supposedly to protect the Greek minority in western Anatolia, but the real reason was the pursuit of the Megali idea, which proposed taking Constantinople and the coastline from the old and crumbling Ottoman Empire. In Smyrna and nearby areas, they were greeted as liberators, but the Turkish majority in Anatolia regarded these actions as foreign invasion. In August 1920, the Treaty of Sèvres was signed, giving Greece Eastern Thrace and Smyrna, while the Straits were put under international supervision. The Ottomans could only keep Constantinople on the European continent. The treaty was never ratified by either side, and while a national resistance movement was forming in Turkey, a Greek offensive was launched. The Greek advance continued without significant results. Mustafa Kemal's forces retreated towards Ankara, but then King Alexander I died, opening the latest round of the national schism. Venizelos, who had governed Greece almost like a dictator, hoped that new elections would reaffirm his strong position, but the population was tired of the war and supported the united opposition that promised to gradually end the conflict. Venizelos suffered a crushing defeat, after which he left the country. He was succeeded by Dimitrios Gounaris, whose government recalled King Constantine I, even though Britain and France both saw him as a pro-German monarch and threatened to cut all financial and military aid. The king returned nonetheless. He immediately started purging Venizelist officers from the army, giving overall command to Anastasios Papoulas, while others simply resigned. A new national defense organization was formed in Constantinople against the royalist cabinet in Athens, which, despite earlier promises of disengagement, further intensified the war with Turkey. In December, the offensive continued. It was halted in March by the Turkish nationalists, partly because Italy and France started supporting them against the Greeks, who were now seen as British puppets. Ankara could not be taken. Months of stalemate followed, during which Greek morale plummeted. By early 1922, it became obvious that the Treaty of Sèvres could not be enforced. A Turkish counterattack and the fall of Smyrna then forced the Greeks to sign a new armistice. Their campaign in Anatolia ended in disaster. Greece was exhausted and demoralized at the end of the conflict. Political infighting continued. In September 1922, the army and the navy rose up against the government in Athens. Constantine was again forced to resign. His oldest son became king as George II. A Venizelist officer became prime minister. Shortly after, loyalist officers, who were blamed for the defeat in Turkey, were put on trial and executed. In July 1923, the Treaty of Lausanne was signed. It established the borders we know today, while a separate population exchange document was also accepted, according to which 500,000 Muslims and more than 1 million Greeks had to relocate. In October 1923, a loyalist coup was defeated. Their faction lost influence. Former Chief of Staff Metaxas left the country, and since all loyalist parties abstained from the next election, the Venizelist parties won in a landslide. King George II also left Greece. Then, in March 1924, a presidential republic was proclaimed, fulfilling the old Venizelist dream. The Second Hellenic Republic first abolished the monarchy through a referendum, but it remained fragile. Just a year later, General Pangalos staged a coup and became president for a brief period before he was removed in a counter-coup. A short conflict with Bulgaria erupted in the same year, after which Greece had to pay for the damages, although it protested that Italy was not treated the same way after it had occupied Corfu in 1923. The democratic deficit kept growing. In the late 20s, thousands of communists and trade union activists were exiled to remote islands, although Venizelos returned as prime minister once again in 1928 and provided some stability, at least until the Great Depression hit the country. Another assassination attempt took place in 1933. The national schism never ended. The 1927 constitution was progressive for the time. It established a bicameral parliament with the Liberal Party back in power. In 1930, suffrage was partially extended to women, but by then, the right-wing People's Party started to become more and more popular. Relations with Turkey were restored in the same year. A Balkan Pact was signed in 1934 with Yugoslavia, Romania, and Turkey, leaving out Bulgaria and Albania. The country, which was now divided into 10 regions, remained a loyal supporter of the League of Nations, but it remained divided, poor, and militarily weak. The army consisted of 10 divisions that had little artillery support, while the navy had 2 cruisers, 12 destroyers, and 6 submarines, with a few smaller vessels. The Air Force used a variety of types. It remained small, although more than 15% of the national budget was spent on the military. Although Greece was better off than the other Balkan countries, its economy was also dominated by agriculture, while light industry was growing, but heavy industry was not present at all. Foreign, mostly British, loans helped, but they also came with serious caveats. A new national bank had to be established, and the gold standard had to be adopted. Like most countries, Greece was hit hard by the Great Depression. The government tried to balance the budget, which was probably the wrong move as it involved tightening the belt. But in 1931, when Great Britain abandoned the gold standard, a bank run occurred in Greece. The following year, the League of Nations declined a request for a loan, Greece went bankrupt, capital controls were implemented, the drachma was devalued, and payments on foreign loans were suspended until 1935. Tourism was on the rise. It remained important until the war. Greece had a population of 6 million in 1928, but more than 1 million were registered as refugees. Many of them moved into large cities, which exploded, creating a housing shortage. A single, state-operated social insurance system was introduced in 1932. It would provide sick pay and compensation to all insured, but not unemployment benefits. Implementing this system would take years. It was eventually done by the new Metaxas regime in 1937. During the interwar period, the ratio of ethnic minorities, mainly Turks and Bulgarians, fell, while transatlantic migration of Greeks also declined. The question of language became important, as the official language of the government was constructed based on Classical Greek, while the population spoke a version of Medieval Greek. The matter was not settled until the 1970s. Literacy stood at 59%, but among women it was only 42%. A school-building program was launched under Venizelos, but conditions in existing institutions were also improved. In October 1935, after a failed Venizelist coup, General Kondylis forced President Zaimis to appoint him prime minister. Then he declared himself regent and abolished the republic in another coup. The monarchy was restored, King George II returned, but he soon dismissed Kondylis and appointed Konstantinos Demertzis interim prime minister. The 1936 elections resulted in a hung parliament, but in the same year, Kondylis, Venizelos, and Demertzis all died. Former Chief of Staff Ioannis Metaxas became interim prime minister, who suspended the parliament in August and implemented an authoritarian regime to prevent social conflict and suppress the communists. He finally launched the social insurance system, but borrowed the symbolism and rhetoric of the Italian fascists, maintaining close links to Britain and France at the same time. His 4th of August regime forced liberal leaders into internal exile, It started improving the country's defenses by building the Metaxas line on the Bulgarian border, and attempted social control through strong censorship, the prohibition of strikes, and a ban on all political parties. Its secret police was modeled on the German Gestapo, certain forms of music were banned, while a national youth organization was established. Nationalism was encouraged, but the population remained apathetic. The regime was not particularly popular among the masses, although support increased once the regime stabilized the drachma and extended its welfare program with unemployment insurance, a 40-hour workweek, improved safety standards, and guaranteed 2-week vacations with pay. However, when Italy annexed Albania in 1939, it became obvious that Greece would be the next target. I have already uploaded a video on the Greco-Italian War, so I will stop at this point. I will continue this series soon with more episodes. In the meantime, check out my other videos, and if you find them interesting, subscribe. Thank you for watching. See you next time.